Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're calling from. We are so happy you're here. Welcome to the Power to Fly Chat and Learn. My name is Hunter. My pronouns are he, they, and I am your host and moderator today. I am so excited to have you here and my speaker, who I'll bring on in just a moment. Before we do that, we would love for you to participate. That's how you say that word. Okay, we would love for you to participate. So please turn on your cameras. No worries about being Instagram ready. You are just hanging out with us. This is a, low key, low stakes, but high value reward here. So feel free. It's a great way to connect with our speaker, who is already their energy is just electric. So I want you to get to have this face-to-face experience with them, as I do, because it's already delightful. Please know that we are recording this, so you will get a rewatch link in the next 2 to 4 business days. It'll also be on our YouTube page, and you can share this with all your friends who you think might be interested, or give it a rewatch for yourself, because I'm sure there's going to be some hot takes that we're wanting to absorb. And the best part, the most exciting thing, is this is interactive. So please do write in the chat. That's how you can ask questions. And that's a great reason to have your cameras on, so our speaker can connect your question with you. Because at the end of the day, we are all people trying to improve our skills, and that's how, and to connect with others. And that's what we're doing here. If you want to ask a question, write in the chat. Please be mindful that this is a shared space. So I encourage you to use welcoming, inclusive language, so that we can all have a wonderful, productive hour. And if you want to write something anonymously, you can write me a question directly. So you can go over the chat section, select my name, Hunter, and you can DM me and write it privately, and I can ask that question on your behalf, which I'm happy to do. Okay, without further ado, Michelle is a UX writer for SquadFlow, who transitioned into UX after more than a decade in social services. Yes, you heard that right, a decade in social services, and now is a UX writer. Are you interested? I sure am. We're going to learn all about it in the next hour. She uses her perspective taking, advocating, and interviewing skills daily to ensure the best user experience possible. Michelle graduated from General Assembly's UXDI course in April of 2022. Welcome, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm excited to be here. So thanks everybody for hopping on, and yeah, I'm open to any question.
All questions are good questions, right?
Exactly.
I had, there's this moment in New York. I live in New York City, and one time I was walking and there was a parent with a child, and the child said something. I didn't hear what the child said, but the parent looked down at the child and said, "Oh, honey, don't be worried about asking a question. You know, all the greatest discoveries started with a question."
Yeah.
So I encourage you all to take that wisdom from the streets of New York, from this person, and ask your questions. Who knows what discoveries it will lead you to? So, Michelle, before we jump in, before I flood you with all these wonderful questions that we got, can you tell me a little bit about your journey? I read a little bit of your bio there. Anything else that you'd like to share with us, or a fun fact about yourself?
Yes. So, well, I spent a decade in child welfare, social services in the child welfare sector. So as you can imagine, very high stress, low pay, but very like rewarding. Was definitely intrinsically motivated to be there and, go into work every day, but it was definitely a struggle. So I think when it came time to pivot, I was really looking for something that aligned with my personal goal of helping people. That's something that makes me really happy. But then also, just get a little more freedom financially and emotionally, and even physically, not being tied to the routine, so to speak. So Anyway, yeah, I mean, we can delve deeper into why I chose UXD later, but really, I think if I could say anything is that my career pivot felt really scary and ended up being all about like freedom. And so that's like really what I want to convey is like, don't be afraid, because it's like it's so freeing to like follow your instinct, follow your gut, and it's rewarding and it pays off, I guess. A fun fact about me, I lived in China for 4 years. There you go.
That is very fun to know.
Yes. Yeah, I got evacuated during the pandemic. The company called me and they were like, yeah, you have 2-3 days to leave the country. You need to go to your passport country. So we thought we were going for 3 weeks and we never left the States. So here we are. So we had our flat packed up by our friends and shipped over from China back to the US where we were living. So that's probably a story for another time though.
That is amazing. So we're going to book you again and we're going to talk all about that. But I am going to keep us on topic now, but thank you for sharing that because now I have a reason to hook you back. So I have to say, so the topic today is tips to navigate your career pivot into UX design. And what you were just saying, Michelle, is very inspiring. I sort of get a little teary-eyed, I'm not going to lie, about like trusting your instincts and that don't let fear inhibit your choices because it led you to freedom. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's what I heard. And that is very inspiring and beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we jump into these questions, let me just wipe those corners a little bit. Before we jump into the questions, to reiterate how this works, friends, is y'all wrote questions in advance and they are stellar. We were talking, Michelle and I were talking before the chat and we're like, wow, these questions are so good. So thank you for writing those. I have them in a cute little document. They've been anonymized, so I don't know who wrote them. If you hear your question being asked, you can go whoop, whoop, a little shout out in the chat if you want. If not, also totally fine. And if you have new questions or more questions, or thoughts about what's happening, resonating with you, drop it in the chat. Also, to start the chat, I'd love to hear where's everyone calling in from. Michelle spent some time in China. Where are you calling in from today? Where's the most like unexpected place you've ever traveled to? I'd love to know. So let me know in the chat. Michelle and I will talk about that and we'll incorporate it into our follow-up conversation that we're going to have about working remotely and abroad. Let's just say that. We'll do that. Okay, friends. So, Michelle, before we jump into these questions, let's back up. I like to just sometimes set the stage. What is UX design? What is it?
Oh, yeah. So UX design is designing for the user. So UX is user experience. So it's all about the user of your product. So, like I worked at PayPal for a while. They have a very, very broad user base. But maybe someone who goes on like the MLB app is as more of a specific user. So you wouldn't necessarily design the D&D app the way that you would the MLB app, because they're probably going to be different users. So you really want to hone in on your audience, and it's very research based. It's very much about not you being brilliant and creative, but you listening and understanding the wants and needs of the person who's going to be using your product.
I love that. Thank you for that. It's always, I find it helpful. A lot of people that are chiming into these talks, some of them are already in this field, they've already done some research, but maybe this is being forwarded on, you were just saying like, I have some friends I'm trying to convince, so it's nice to set the stage. Maybe this is going to be forwarded to a friend that sometimes the outside world will let us know where they might want to call us to, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So so we had a question. Someone asked you, could you elaborate on your experience pivoting from the social sector into UX?
Yeah, for sure. So, being in social work for so long, I had skills like, I mean, I had solid skills in like reading people and perspective taking and advocating for the client at the time, user now, right? And problem solving for specific people. So I when I went into the UXDI program at General Assembly, I felt like I didn't have too many skills that were transferable, but really everything that I've just named are things that I do every single day. And so my experience was a lot smoother than I anticipated because like my kind of fear of like, well, I'm not really a designer, like I've dabbled in graphic design a little bit, but I really want to do this. I think I could do this. It ended up being just such a smooth transition. I already had all kinds of skills to be effective in my position as a UX writer. So, or if I'd chosen to do design, UX design. So it was definitely not without fear for sure. And I had to figure out the money and like working part-time versus not working at all and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I looked at it and I was like, it's 3 months of my life for this program. I am never going to regret the time the investments I make in myself, time, money, or otherwise, right? So I chose to have 3 months to be selfish, so to speak, and I have not regretted it like at all, ever. So yeah.
I love that. Well, we can't really help other people if we don't help ourselves.
Right.
And I love as Queen Oprah said, the greatest gift you can give yourself is time.
Oh yeah. And it flew by, really. Those 3 months of learning, and they were lovely. And I was with all these people who were also transitioning into UX. And so we kind of became like I don't know, we were just like buddies. I still talk to a lot of them. So it was actually a fantastic experience.
So awesome. I'm going to give some shout outs to the chat. We got some folks calling in from Denver who this person said they've lived in a bunch of places. Slovenia would be the fun one that they're choosing. We got someone shouting out from Houston. They've lived in London, the Bahamas, and the US Virgin Islands. We got someone traveled to Botswana, Japan. Nice. Oh my goodness, this group is so cultured. This is fantastic. Kenya. Come on, Kenya. Love this. So great. Okay, I love that. Thank you for sharing, everybody. I love it. I love it. I saw there's a New Yorker in the house. Hello, neighbor. I'm also in New York City. Good to see you. Love that. So Michelle, tell me about what are some of the key decisions you took that helped you land your first role in UX? So obviously doing this, you mentioned, this 3-month commitment as well was part of that.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing was figuring out like where I was going to go to school. Was I going to get a master's? Was I going to do a boot camp? All that kind of stuff. And I chose to do a boot camp. And ultimately I chose General Assembly because I had actually I had a friend who I worked with in China. She is a South Korean person living in South Korea who completed the boot camp before I did. And when I was looking into it, I just stumbled upon like her Instagram where she had mentioned that she went there. And so she and I got together and had a coffee chat, and she was like, oh yes, General Assembly is the greatest. They're like prepare you so well. And I've already got a job, blah, blah, blah. So there's nothing better than word of mouth. Right. And so that's why I chose General Assembly. Loved it. Loved the diversity all over the organization. Was so impressed with how they conducted class and felt safety in the classroom, even though we were doing a virtual classroom. So all of that was great. And one of the things about General Assembly is they give you coaches that continue with you. So after I graduated, I still was getting calls and emails from CJ going, hey, like, how's it going? Like, can I see your resume? That kind of stuff. So just having someone check in with me as I'm on the job hunt. And one of the big decisions was that I decided for myself, I was like, in my age, like, I don't need to mess around. I know I want to do UX writing. So I just really geared my portfolio and my entire job search toward UX writing. I did not apply for any jobs but UX writer jobs. And so I just stayed really focused, which that's not for everyone. That was the right path for me. So and when I decided, okay, like I'm gonna get serious about the job hunt, I had an offer from PayPal within 6 weeks. So it worked out. It worked out. Those I think those were the big things, was like deciding for the right school, deciding the right path, and like honing my portfolio and my job search toward that. I use LinkedIn mainly for my job search, just in case anyone's wondering. And yeah. I also, sorry, let me just say, because I did the user experience design course and I wanted to be a UX writer, I also did some UX writing courses to, I don't know, just beef up my resume a bit. So like accessibility and UX writing. And I watched some seminars with like the UX Writing Hub and that kind of stuff. So that was super helpful also for getting a job, because I had a sense of what the heck was going to happen when I got in the job force.
Yeah, well, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot. You were tenacious, it sounds like, in your pursuits. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I have kids, so you know, I got to put food on the table.
Mhm. Yeah, it raises the stakes so you can serve steak or vegan food or whatever it is you want on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what does a typical day look like as a UX designer? And are you remote? Do you go in the office? What do you do? What does it actually look like at the computer? Talk to me about all that.
Okay, so I think if I lived, so my corporate office is in Portland. I think if I lived in Portland, I would have the option to go in if I wanted to. I live in Oklahoma, so I am fully remote. And there typically are, I guess, there are like certain one-on-ones that I have to do with managers throughout the week, but there's a lot of heads down time. We have the opportunity to bring our work to like design crits 2 or 3 times a week. Some of them are content design crits, and some of them are like design systems design crits. And so if you don't know the difference, like the content would be just the writing, just talking about the writing, and then like a design systems would be like the brand identity of the entire brand, including like visuals and stuff, not necessarily just tone and voice or whatever. So lots of opportunity to make sure that I'm collaborating and representing the user in a way that aligns with the business goals. And so yeah, for me, it's a lot, it's problem solving, right? And there's never, I think one of the things I love about UX is that you're always able to iterate, right? Like, so maybe you're putting something out there and then you go test it and you figure out, that like we need to tweak this or that. And so that's one of the most fun things for me, is that I get to continue to make things better and better and better for my users. And so that's, yeah, I don't know. Again, helping people. So like, that's part of it that I really like.
I love that. What's that?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. What a typical day looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So friends, if this is inspiring you to ask your own questions or some additional questions, we would love to hear from you. You can write in the chat, or you can message me privately and I can ask that anonymously on your behalf. Okay, what soft skills are transferable to UX? So clearly a lot. You working in social services, you've talked a lot about helping people and being a problem solver. Please elaborate on those and any other ones that come to mind.
Yeah. Anytime we're asking questions like, how might we, what do we want to know? It's always just digging into the mind of the user. So if you are adept at interviewing or writing interview questions, if you are good at communicating with colleagues or with the users. Advocating for users' needs and wants, being able to put yourself in the shoes of the user at any point in the journey, super important. So like, I mean, checkout is where you get money, but you don't get to check out unless your global nav gets you there. You know what I mean? So like being able to like step into the shoes of the user. So perspective taking, advocating, problem solving, tons of collaboration. I would also just say like what getting rid of your ego. Like it's interesting, the best teams that I've been a part of have been ones where people aren't like so concerned with like their work and their ego because they're so user focused. So I think like making sure that you're a person who's walking in like with open hands going, hey, this is what I've got and how can we like work together to make sure it's the best for the user, is definitely a solid skill to have in UX for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Bring some Zen Buddhism to your approach of releasing the ego so that you can get the job done.
There's no time for it. It's not about you.
Mhm. It hardly ever is.
Right.
As much as I want to make it about me, Michelle, it's very rarely not.
So funny. I was thinking the same thing.
There's a great line that if you go back and watch other videos, you may have heard me say this before, but it's too good not to repeat. There was this drag queen in the 80s that I was turned on to this line where it's like, they said, not to make it all about me, but it's just so cold outside of the spotlight.
Nice. Yes.
So I love hearing all about these skills. What are some misconceptions about UX? Do you have to be like a master coder? Do you have to like, what are things that people you think are misconceptions about it?
Yeah. About you. Well, yes, that you have to be really good at code, or that you have to be super creative. That's a big one. A lot of people are like, well, I couldn't do that because I'm not creative, or I couldn't do that because I'm not a good writer or whatever. And it's like, well, hold on a second. Like, I think that is a big misconception because it's not about, again, not about you and your creativity. Like, it's about understanding and being able to synthesize like research and then put that into a solution that is right for the user. So there's misconceptions about you make a ton of money and do nothing. I definitely make good money, but I definitely work hard. Let's see. I think the biggest one I run into is the one about being creative. Well, I'm not very artistic, and it's like, well, you absolutely don't have to be. Like that's not a requirement.
Yeah. And talk to me about the relationship to code, because I know I get that one a lot too, asking a lot about that.
I think it's good if you understand some code, but like strictly UX is not, it's different from development, right? So while developers are being handed the solution that UXers like, or that we've found out and solved for, right? Like we find out what the problem is and figure out the user's wants and needs. We solve for the problem, test it, make sure that it is right for our users, and then we hand off the solution to the devs, right? And then they make the magic happen and actually, implement those solutions into the website or the app or whatever. So while knowing like dev processes is probably very valuable, it's something that you can learn as you go along, and it's okay to be new and go, you know what, I don't quite understand what you're talking about or what you mean, or how you're gonna do that or whatever. They're typically happy to talk to you if you're interested, but there's no real requirement for like knowing HTML or CSS or Java or God forbid Python or any of that. Like, yeah, that is somebody else's job, so to speak. I mean, it's adjacent, right? But not UX.
Yeah. I'd love to pull back a little bit more into the hood. It kind of circles back to what a typical day looks like. So you said, you come up with these solutions and stuff, and then the magic happens. But like, what does that look like, coming up with these solutions, synthesizing the feedback? What is that process?
Oh yeah. So it depends on if you have a dedicated UX researcher or not. But there's definitely a problem is presented. Now that can be like through user feedback or someone a UX designer looking through like the journey flow and going, yeah, we're dropping language here, or we're missing opportunities here to bring the user in, or keep the user in the flywheel, or this logged off experience isn't up to par or whatever. And so then you do the whole design process of, discovery, what do the users need and all of this, and then defining what the problem is, and then starting to dream big about how can we solve the problem, and then coming up with a solution, testing it, iterating on it. So like in doing that design process in the day-to-day, looks like, hey, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk about, here's where we're going to go with this, like, let's just say design sprint. And so this sprint, we're going to do discovery. We're going to do some research, and that research is going to look like this. And so then we'll come back at the end of the sprint, after the research is done, have another meeting where we learn what the researcher found out or what the research told us. And then we start again. Okay, this sprint, we're going to define the problem, and so it's touch and go between like having meetings with like cross-platform meetings, right? So like maybe finance needs to be involved, or revenue, or maybe the CEO needs to be looped in, probably not at a big company, but at a startup maybe. And so it's meetings and heads down time, and meetings and heads down time. And you really are going through the design process, which you learn, or I learned at GA, like exactly the way they taught it. So, yeah, I don't know. I never feel like I'm alone. And it's nice to have that heads down time where I am alone figuring out the solution, but always going back to the design critiques, making sure like I'm on the right path and everybody's on the same page, and then taking it to the user where they can validate the findings and solution.
I love that. Thank you. I love getting into the nitty-gritty, because there's these big umbrella categories of jobs, and it's like UX design, and you're like, well, what do you really do? Kind of like these misconceptions you were saying, like, oh, I gotta get paid a lot and do nothing. It's like, no, I work my buns off. But it's like, to actually get into it, of like what that is, it's not always necessarily fodder for a cocktail party, but that's why we're here.
Right. Love it.
So you made this amazing pivot. And someone asked, is it possible to land a role in UX with no previous related experience? I have a background in supply chain management. So they're coming from a different field. You came from a different field. You took some actions that you shared with us of how to make this. And then you did land that job with PayPal, I think you mentioned.
Yep.
So talk to me about or advice that you would give, or some insights to other folks that are looking to come from one thing into UX.
Yeah, I think my answer is yes, it's possible. I mean, for all intents and purposes, had no real experience in UX before my first role. So my answer is yes, but I think one of the things you're going to want to do is like know the value of your worth. Like, you are not just going to, like, I don't know, in my case, I didn't like come out of General Assembly with just a UX/DI certificate. I did have that, but really who I was bringing the full weight of who I was with my soft skills that were so solid. And cherry on top, I have this user experience design certificate, and they taught me how to do Figma, which is the industry standard. So like, I think that if you'll stop and you'll evaluate yourself for already the skills you have. I mean, supply chain management you definitely have some skills. There's got to be some data analytics in there somewhere. I mean, like, being able to manage projects, all that kind of stuff, like those are things you already know how to do that they're not going to have to teach you. And then wherever you decide to go and get your education, make sure it just supplements the skills that you already have and teaches you things you need to know about UX design. And I would definitely say strong second to Figma, because I remember going to PayPal and realizing that because Figma was newer, and it's not as new now, but there were some of the like kind of old school designers who were still more comfortable working in like Adobe XD or Sketch than they were in Figma. And I was able to like go, oh, you just do this, that, or the other, or the keyboard shortcut is this. And like, my value was definitely noticed, right? Because I had this program down from my boot camp. So yeah, I think you should go do it. Go do it.
Go do it, friend. You heard it here. We support you, and we're giving you some tools and tips to do it. Also, I just have to highlight, I loved solid soft skills. That's just delicious language.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly. And it's like my dad always loved jumbo shrimp. That was one of his favorite ones.
Yes. And yummy.
Yes, also that. Okay, friends, can you believe it? We are halfway through. So we only have about 25-30 minutes left for open questions. So feel free to keep those questions coming in the chat. We would love to hear from you. You can do it publicly in the chat, or you can DM me and I can ask it anonymously for you. Okay. What else do we got here? Okay, here's a good one. So someone asked, since I'm pivoting into UX from public health, what are some good questions or phrases to use on my resume to make me look more hireable?
Oh my goodness. Public health. My gosh, that's public health in my mind is all about people. Public health is an area that's steeped in research, right? So I think, gosh, I mean, I think that's a hard one for me, but I would love to chat further with you about it. Hit me up on LinkedIn. No, I'm thinking about talking about research and understanding research and how to synthesize research and the value of research, and that how you implemented findings from research, solved for problems, and implemented those into your work. Thinking about having to work with people and the uniqueness of, I mean, public health, again, a wide user base, right? And so having to see people for who they are and meet them where they're at. Talking about understanding the whole person. That's something we talk about a lot, is the whole person, not just the person who's showing up to, so I work for Driveway now, right? So they buy and sell cars. So it's more than just a person coming to buy a car. Maybe they're credit sensitive, and so that's why they're applying online and not going face to face, or the mom who's way too busy to get to the dealership to get her car serviced. So we will go and pick up her car for her and service it and bring it back to her. Thinking about the whole person. What are they bringing to the app? What are they bringing to the product when they sit down to it, right? It's not just one goal, but they also have a whole life going on. And I think like public health would lend itself to having a really keen understanding of people in that respect. Gosh, I hope that helps whoever submitted that question.
Yes. And if they have more questions for you, they can follow up on LinkedIn, you mentioned. Yes. I love that. And I love that of the see the whole person, bring the whole person.
Yeah, you're not ever just solving the problem. You're solving the problem for a person who has X, Y, and Z going on at the same time, and so you have to really consider that this person may not be in the mood for something cute, or like teasing them about, whoops, I guess your credit's bad because you didn't get approved or whatever. Like that's, I mean, I know that's a very extreme example, but you understand what I'm saying. Like just having respect for people to be people and have a lot going on in life is very essential.
It's so important. It's encouraging to hear that too, because we don't know how anyone got to where they are, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Make any sort of value judgments in the in the building of it could be a huge, distancing factor.
Yeah, for sure. And affect really the profit margin for your company, which they're not going to like. And one of the things that I really am passionate about is trauma-informed perspective. So even trauma-informed writing, which is like really kind of coming online in UX, is something I'm like really getting into, because all of my work in child welfare was had to be trauma informed, right? Those are children from hard places, and a lot of times parents from hard places. And you just have to have the sensitivity to understand that, like there's so many layers there. And so why wouldn't we bring that to our products, to help support and encourage people along the journey through our products. So anyway,
that's fascinating. I mean, you had a lot of experience in helping navigate folks through trauma, and now more than ever, there's individualized trauma, and there's also this global trauma that everyone's been experiencing. So I feel that seems very pertinent.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Wow, so interesting. Okay, someone else asked, any advice on building our portfolio as professionals with no UX related experience? Shall we include projects we developed in boot camps and courses and things like that?
I think you should include your best projects. And I think that if you have a boot camp project that you can include, I did for my first job, I had a boot camp project, then yeah, go for it. But if you get out of boot camp and you go, I know I'm so much stronger than I was for that project, then feel free to like take on some, maybe you do something for minimal pay, or you do something for a nonprofit where you do some volunteer work that you're able to negotiate being able to put it on your portfolio. I guess whatever it is, whether it's a boot camp project or a concept project or something like maybe you have gotten paid for, I think just make sure you show your best work and your absolute best one, your best portfolio piece. I would say definitely make sure it's first because these people don't have time to go through them. And I was just my other like kind of piece of advice about your portfolio is remember UX is all about the user. So the user of your portfolio is likely going to be a UX manager or a UX designer looking to hire you, right? Or to understand, do you understand the design process? Do you understand how to connect with users and understand their wants and needs and pain points and that kind of stuff? So that's something I always say to people when I look at their portfolios to give them feedback is like, are you focused on the user or not? Because your user is not someone who has no idea about UX necessarily. I mean, you do have to tell the story, but think about who your user is. Hopefully that'll be helpful advice. And don't be afraid to reach out to a UX writer to help. I help people all the time. I mean, people just reach out to me on LinkedIn and are like, hey, I heard you look at portfolios. Would you be willing to look mine over? And if I have the time, I'm always like, yes, because people help me get here. And that's one of the coolest things about the UX community is that it is such a helpful community. And I really love that. So, or you can go on adplist.com and you can find a mentor who would be willing to look over your portfolio. So
hearing all of that, that's so encouraging and wonderful to hear how you're paying it forward as people have helped you.
Yeah, I love helping people.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so you shared with us earlier about a friend of yours had posted on their socials about the boot camp, about General Assembly. It caught your attention.
Yep.
You talked to them about it, a little chat. So based off that, were you researching other boot camps as well, and then that swayed you? And then I'd love to hear about your experience in the boot camp as well with General Assembly.
Oh, sure. Yes. And General Assembly was a little bit more expensive than some of the other ones. And so it was interesting because I'm a person who's a firm believer in you get what you pay for. And I'm also not a person who could have done this on my own without like someone holding my hand and making sure that I was like, understanding everything. So, I mean, I guess I kind of knew myself ahead of time. So, I was looking into like, what are they called? Self-directed options. And then also, other options where you are in a classroom, that maybe didn't quite cost as much, but went a little longer, or didn't quite cover the material I thought that I felt like I needed. And so, yeah, I was just researching because there are a lot of different options. But my friend Haley, Haley's her English name, she was, sorry, that's weird. After living in China, and told you all she's South Korean. I don't know why I needed to say it was her English name. Anyway, whatever. Sorry, I'm having a moment. It's fine. Haley, who is lovely, she did the work from South Korea online, and I just thought, okay, like she had to work through a whole like time change mess and all of that to make sure that she could do it, and she did it successfully and spoke really highly of the program. So, yeah, word of mouth like makes a big difference. If I were you and I didn't have any like personal experience with someone who had gone through a boot camp that you're interested in, that you're researching, I would reach out to people on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I saw you went to this boot camp. I would love some information about it, or some feedback, or can we get a coffee? Can I have 15 minutes of your time? Or here are my questions. Would you mind, answering them and emailing me back, or whatever it is. So that's, I guess, my thoughts about that. My experience in the boot camp was, they were very serious. They knew what they were doing. I guess the instructors, I guess I should say, they made a very welcoming environment for everyone. If you know anything about education, it's super vulnerable. It is a vulnerable space. And so I feel like one of the strong points about General Assembly, other than being so like diverse and having diversity up in the like higher, the higher ranks of the company, which I love, was that anyone could walk into our classroom and feel the freedom to totally be themselves, and the safety to learn what they needed to learn, to then get out and get a job and do what they needed to do. And that, especially as a social worker, was super important for me. And I just like the value of that cannot be understated. So like, I felt like, I mean, for me, I've also felt like it's worth every penny. So I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about money. I won't talk about it in detail, but the cost of the program, when compared to how much I made a year as a social worker, now a year later, I've tripled my income from social worker. So if you think about like, oh, it's $16,000, $17,000, whatever it is for GA, I'm not quite sure, whatever it is, that it's a drop in the bucket compared to where I am a year later. You know what I mean? And so like my experience was just that they were super professional. They were super welcoming. They, allowed people the freedom to like, learn, have that safety. And then like, they kind of put the money where their mouth is, right? I mean, I'm here a year later at a senior position and have triple my income. So I'm a fan. I'm a yes. I'm a solid yes.
Happy customer.
Right?
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, it's really incredible. It's truly incredible in 1 year, with help and seeking it out and doing your research, and then doing your homework and showing up and doing the work, what you've been able to accomplish.
I think one of the things about like tech right now is that all we're seeing are all of these layoffs. And it's like, yeah, but hold on a second. Tech is everywhere. Tech is everywhere. I'll just stop there anyway and say that there are also tons of jobs, tons of people hiring. And just don't take no for an answer. I mean, you know what I mean? Like I think that if you were to let fear stop you from anything, it would be sad. So I'm
Mm,
a big proponent of like, hey, there is a job out there for you, and in a good company where they will value your time and pay you for it. So I don't know. Take the leap.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. So good. So good. Um, gosh, there was so much in there and I had so many follow-up questions and now they all just went bloop out of my head because I was so enamored with what you were just saying. Truly, truly, truly. Okay, so okay, so we have about a little less than 10 minutes left, but we're about 10 minutes left for open questions. So if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in. Oh, one of my follow-up questions. It's back. It's back. It's like that song in the shower, and you're like, that's the song I was thinking of. There it is. Just had to tap dance. I escaped for a minute. I knew it would come back. So how did you know, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but like, how did you know UX was when you were in social work and you're like, I'm not in tech? How did you figure out that UX was the thing where it's just like, if tech is the tip of the iceberg, and then there's all of these jobs, because like you said, it's in everywhere, it's in everything.
Yep.
How did you know that UX over here was the thing to go towards?
Yeah, really good question. So I had, like I said, dabbled in graphic design mainly for myself. I had done some for a school that when I lived in China, my husband worked at a school there, he was an art teacher, and my kids went there. So I was, on the scene helping out. And I had the skills to help with the little bit that they needed, which ended up being a lot that they needed. So anyway.
Funny how that happens.
So, I thought, so I was working in domestic infant adoption at the time. My company was getting out of adoption and they were focusing on foster care and refugee care. So they were shutting down my program and they were happy for me to transition over to foster care, but I was not happy to do that. I was burnt out. And so I knew I wanted to pivot careers. And so I started looking at graphic design and I was like, I'm just not really sure this is what I want to do. And so as I'm researching, I went on, I don't know, I think Udemy and took like a $10 coding course and learned some, HTML and CS, like very basic. Like I was like, oh, I'm able to do this. But it was just enough for me to know that I hated it. Hated it. I was like, I will die a slow death if I become a developer. So that's not it. And as I was reading more and more, data analytics, data science just didn't feel like the right fit for me, although super interesting. And so as I was reading more about UX, they kept talking about it's all about people, it's all about the user. And I was like, that seems close enough to social work to me that I'm going to give it a go. And so it worked out way better than I thought it was going to. So yeah, that's why I chose UX.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's so great to hear, like how I love hearing the twists and the turns and the valleys and the plateaus and the peaks that we get to summit and climb. Everyone's story. It's so cool. So cool. Okay. In the last few minutes, somebody asked, are boot camps seen positively by employers? Do boot camps typically help you connect with potential employers?
Definitely for that last question. I mean, one of the big things that GA does is literally connect you with employers. SquadFlow, in fact, was one of the employers I was connected with by GA. And so I still work for them. And so it like definitely. And I think most of them do that, but I know General Assembly does a really good job of it. And so like, in fact, a guy in my class is also still working for Squad Flow. And so we're both, I mean, this is over a year later, still employed by the same startup company that, I mean, we would have never found without GA. So yes. And then as far as like employers, like PayPal, no one ever asked me if I was from a boot camp. No one ever, and it Driveway as well. I mean, no one cares about that. Like you show up and you can do the work or you can't, right? You've got the chops or you don't. And so it didn't necessarily matter that I had a bachelor's degree. It didn't matter that I had like no UX experience necessarily. My portfolio spoke for itself. And I was personable enough that Ray, my manager at PayPal, was like, I just can't pass you up. Like, I just want to work with you. And I think sometimes in tech, it's like, if you have the chops, like it's like getting the job is more about finding the right fit than it is even about like your skills sometimes. I mean, you have to have the skills, but you've got to be not an asshole, right? And you've got to be like, get along with others, all those kinds of things for it to go well. And I tend to get along with pretty much anyone. So yeah, I've never even been asked if I went to where I got my education, anything like that. It's all been about the portfolio. So like I would not, I feel like the days of, I think I said this earlier, like the days of like, go to school right out of high school, go to your university right out of high school and get your 4 years and get massively in debt before you decide what you want to, like, before you get out in the job market. I think all of that is like gone. It's like dying. And really it's more about like, do you have the skills to do this? And if you do, we're going to hire you. Like, so I don't know. I've never had an employer speak down to me or like nothing like that. Like they're so respectful and interested really in my work and not so much my education. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely helpful. Spot on. Super inspiring. Okay, so we have time for just a couple more questions. Somebody asked, where does UX as a profession fall into the progression to product management?
Oh, interesting. Oh my gosh, I feel like I need more context. Like fall into the progression, like working your way up.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know that it does necessarily. I think it can be helpful well, it's definitely helpful to understand UX. It would, and to work as a UXer before doing product management. But I also think that you don't necessarily have to do that. I think that there are courses for just product management that you can go and take, and they will teach you enough UX for you to understand, because it's really like being the PM is very different from being the designer, although I know that they're adjacent. I don't know that I have a super intelligent answer for this, other than I don't know that you have to, it has to be the progression. I don't know, maybe Eli can answer this better than me. And now I'm putting him on the spot. Eli, are you with us?
We can drop it in the chat if he's around, okay. And we can circle back to it. Yeah, totally. That's what I love it. A little dose of humility. We don't know everything. We can't expect to know everything, Michelle. That's why we're here to learn. And sometimes we don't know the answers, and that's okay. Yeah, that's okay, right? Okay, time for one last question. What does career development look like inside the UX field?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll first of all say, like, everyone I've worked for has been super interested in me developing more skills. So it's very supportive environment for you to like go and take a course on like, their management system, whether that's like Jira or Azure DevOps or whatever it is. Like, hey, make sure you understand how to do this. And or like Figma, getting like a little Figma certification or whatever it is. I think it like tech in general is very good about being supportive of you honing your skills, getting better and better and better. So that's first. And then how that supports career development is that you have better skills, you're getting more and more education, and typically it's, well, I shouldn't say typically, I should say in my experience, it's that there's been just like a UX writer, then you move to a senior level position, and then a management type position, like and then up from there if you want to keep going. So I feel like there's lots of opportunity to grow. It may be that you're moving from UX writer to senior UX writer, you have to move companies just because maybe like there's not room in the company you're at. But I also think that's okay, because moving around in tech is not looked ill upon. It's just something that happens or can happen. I mean, you can stay at the same company forever if you want to, but it's also not, I don't know, it's not looked poorly upon you if you work at, 5 companies in 6 years or whatever. That's also okay. So I do love that, because you can really figure out the field, because there's so many different areas, right? There's like different areas of UX, like research and writing and UI and that kind of like there, you can like specialize, but then there's also like, okay, well, do you want to do ed tech or health tech or fintech or right? And so sometimes it takes people a while to figure that out. And that's okay.
I love that. Well, you got some fans in the audience. They want to know, how can they follow you on LinkedIn and keep in touch with you after this?
Yeah, please do. And like I said, I'm serious. I'm not just talking. I'm seriously happy to look over a portfolio or a resume, and give you my one little opinion, with the caveat of please get a second opinion. But to help out. So my LinkedIn is, I think it's Michelle-Thorn. Is that right? Can I drop it in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. You can.
Like,
Yes, you can double check, make sure we're hitting up, we're sliding into the correct Michelle Thorn's DMs. That's always good.
Michelle Thorn is a famous porn star in the UK. So don't mess this up, friends.
Well, that is a slightly different connection. And I wonder if they're on LinkedIn. I would love to know, but who knows? But when I typed in your name, you were the first person to come up on LinkedIn. So, but if you share your computer with anyone, friends, make sure those parental controls are on. You never know what's going to happen. So, Michelle, this has been so much fun.
Yes.
Love chatting with you. I hope we get to do this again. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Yeah, I loved it. And to everyone who came, hey, thanks for coming, for showing up. It's been fun. I really would love to connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah, please do, friends. Do that. I'm on LinkedIn. Michelle's on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, friends, for your participation, your questions, your engagement. You are so great. I hope we get to have you all back. I recognize some of you. So thank you, friends who are part of the Power to Fly family. I love it. So thank you so much. Michelle, have a great rest of your day. I hope the gray sky clears up for you, but luckily you are clearly a light that shines right through it. So I'm not worried about you.
Thank you, Hunter. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, everybody. And we will see you at the next one. Have a great day, everybody.